It was now 2 days before the Passover and the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, and the chief priests and the scribes were seeking how to arrest him by stealth and kill him. For they said, "Not during the feast, lest there be a tumult of the people." The Gospel of Mark.
The Gospels say that after the incident in the temple, Jesus spent his days preaching to the multitudes in Jerusalem. At night, he withdrew from the city to the nearby Mount of Olives, across from the temple and the city walls. While Jesus preached the glorious justice of the heavenly kingdom to come, he already knew that betrayal and suffering awaited him on earth.
Then one of the 12, who is called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I deliver him to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment on, he sought an opportunity to betray him. The Gospel of Matthew.
The opportunity could not wait. Jerusalem was filling with people. The Sadducees wanted Jesus out of the way before his teachings started a riot. Jesus called his disciples together.
And he said to them, "I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer."
During this Last Supper with his disciples, Jesus revealed the shocking news that one of the 12 would betray him. As the horrified disciples stared at one another, Judas Iscariot asked, "Is it I, Lord?" Jesus replied, "You have said so." Jesus knew his hour was at hand. The Gospels say that after supper, he brought the disciples to the Mount of Olives. There he revealed another troubling glimpse of the future.
Then Jesus said to them, "You will all fall away because of me this night." Peter declared to him, "Though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away." Jesus said to him, "Truly I say to you, this very night, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times." The Gospel of Matthew.
Peter and the other disciples protested that they would never abandon their teacher. They could not foresee what would happen that night. Jesus led them on into a garden called Gethsemane.
And he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even unto death. Remain here and watch." And going a little farther, he fell on the ground and prayed, "Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me." The Gospel of Matthew.
Three times Jesus prayed to God to spare him from the agony to come. 3 times he found the disciples sleeping instead of keeping watch. But as he began to scold them for the 3rd time, he suddenly stopped.
A crowd came up, and the man who was called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him, but Jesus asked him,
"Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?"
When Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said,
"Lord, should we strike with our swords?"
And one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But Jesus answered,
"No more of this."
And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him,
"Am I leading a rebellion that you have come with swords and clubs? Every day I was with you in the temple courts, and you did not lay a hand on me, but this is your hour."
Under cover of darkness, the men who arrest Jesus bring him down from the Mount of Olives and back inside the walls of Jerusalem. They hurry him through the narrow streets of the sleeping city to the house of Caiaphas, high priest of the temple, where his enemies are waiting for him.
Peter followed at a distance. And when some there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said,
"This man was with him."
But he denied it.
"Woman, I don't know him,"
he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said,
"You also are one of them."
"Man, I am not,"
Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted,
Certainly this fellow was with me, but he is a Galilean.
Peter replied.
"Man, I don't know what you're talking about."
Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him.
Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times.
And he went outside and wept bitterly.
While Peter wept, Judas Iscariot returned to the temple. He flung down the 30 pieces of silver at the feet of the priests who had paid him to betray his teacher, and filled with remorse, he hanged himself.
And they led Jesus to the high priest, and all the elders and the scribes were assembled. Now the chief priests and the whole council sought testimony against Jesus to put him to death. But they found none, for many bore false witness against him, and their witness did not agree. The Gospel of Mark.
Suddenly Caiaphas asked Jesus, "Are you the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God?" Mark, Jesus proclaimed that he was the Messiah. According to Matthew, Jesus told Caiaphas, "You have said so." And in Luke's account, he answers, "If I tell you, you will not believe." But the Gospels agree that whatever Jesus answered, it was the answer Caiaphas was looking for.
Then the high priest tore his robes and said, "Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your judgment?" They answered, "He deserves death." Then they spat in his face and struck him, and some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy, you Christ. Who is it that struck you?" The Gospel of Matthew.
Having condemned Jesus to death for claiming to be the Messiah, the Jewish leaders faced another problem: how to execute him. Only Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, had the power to execute criminals. But Caiaphas and his friends knew how to get Pilate's attention.
A Messiah, by definition, is the ultimate ruler of a people. So you can't have a successful Messiah and Roman rule at the same time.
From the house of Caiaphas, the high priest's men dragged Jesus across Jerusalem to the residence of Pontius Pilate.
Then the whole assembly rose and led him off to Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying,
"We have found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Messiah, a king."
So Pilate asked Jesus,
"Are you the king of the Jews?"
You have said so.
Then Pilate announced to the chief priests and the crowd,
"I find no basis for a charge against this man."
But they insisted,
He stirs up the people all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee and has come all the way here.
Pilate called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people, and said to them,
You brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion. I have examined him in your presence and have found no basis for your charges against him. As you can see, he has done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish him and then release him.
With one voice they cried out,
Away with this man!
Release Barabbas to us!
Barabbas had been thrown into prison for an insurrection in the city and for murder. Wanting to release Jesus, Pilate appealed to them again, but they kept shouting,
Crucify him!
Crucify him!
Crucify him! He's not the king.
For the third time, Pilate spoke to them. Why? What crime has this man committed? I have found in him no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore, I will have him punished and then release him. But with loud shouts, they insistently demanded that he be crucified. And their shouts prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant their demand. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, the one they asked for, and surrendered Jesus to their will.
Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus, and they stripped him and put a scarlet robe upon him. And weaving a crown of thorns, they put it on his head. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they spat upon him and struck him on the head, and led him away to crucify him. The Gospel of Matthew.